The United States military just suffered a loss that has no parallel in modern warfare. Not soldiers killed, though casualties are being reported. Not equipment damaged, though the damage is extensive. Something far worse than either of those things. Something that fundamentally changes the strategic calculation across every American deployment in the Middle East. Iran destroyed America's missile defense systems. Not one battery, not a single radar installation. Not the kind of limited tactical success that smaller militaries occasionally manage against superior opponents. In a single 90-minute operational window, Iran executed coordinated strikes against 7 Patriot batteries, 2 THAAD systems, and multiple AN/TPY-2 radar installations spread across 4 countries. The combined value of the destroyed equipment stands at $2.7 billion. But that number, as staggering as it is, does not come close to capturing what was actually lost. Each Patriot battery costs approximately $250 million. Each THAAD system runs $900 million. The AN/TPY-2 X-band radars cost $574 million each, and that is before counting the interceptor missiles loaded inside the destroyed launchers or the support infrastructure that makes these systems operationally viable in the first place. What Iran destroyed was not $2.7 billion worth of hardware. What Iran destroyed was the capability to defend American forces across the entire Persian Gulf region. The systems that existed specifically to shoot down Iranian missiles were destroyed by Iranian missiles before they could fire a single interceptor in response. The irony is almost impossible to believe, but it happened. And the Pentagon is scrambling right now to understand exactly how. Here is what we know from multiple intelligence sources, satellite imagery, and verified reports from the ground. At 3:42 in the morning Gulf time, Iranian forces launched a complex strike package involving at least 47 missiles from positions inside Iran. The missiles targeted American Patriot batteries at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, and 3 separate positions across the UAE. Simultaneously, additional missiles targeted THAAD systems positioned in the UAE and Oman. The strikes were coordinated to arrive within seconds of one another. The Patriot operators had between 90 and 120 seconds of warning from the moment of launch detection to the moment of impact. In that window, they were expected to activate systems, acquire targets, calculate firing solutions, launch interceptors, and successfully defend themselves. They could not because the operators failed, but because the timeline was physically impossible. By the time the Patriot systems were ready to engage, the incoming Iranian missiles were already inside the minimum engagement envelope. Too close, too fast. 7 Patriot batteries hit, 7 out of 7, 2 THAAD systems destroyed. Multiple radar installations burning across the region. The defensive architecture that America spent 2 decades carefully positioning across the Middle East was eliminated in a single hour and a half. Here's exactly what Iran used and how they achieved something the Pentagon's own classified war games had categorized as nearly impossible. The strikes were not conducted with Iran's most advanced hypersonic weapons. Those were reserved for other targets. The Patriot and THAAD systems were destroyed by weapons specifically selected to exploit known structural vulnerabilities in American defensive doctrine, Fateh 110, medium-range ballistic missiles. A circular error probable of 10 meters, not hypersonic, not maneuvering during terminal phase, just fast, accurate, and numerous enough to overwhelm the targeting process entirely. The attack unfolded in 2 precisely timed phases. In the first phase, Iran launched 22 ballistic missiles on trajectories that convincingly mimicked attacks against American bases, but were actually targeted at empty desert 50 to 100 kilometers from the actual Patriot positions. The Patriot radars detected these launches immediately. Operators began calculating intercept solutions. Resources were allocated against tracks heading toward occupied bases rather than tracks heading toward empty sand. This was exactly the vulnerability Iran had spent years studying. Patriot systems have a finite number of targets they can simultaneously engage. Against 22 incoming missiles, the systems prioritized based on impact predictions. The operators did precisely what they were trained to do, and Iran had designed the entire operation around that training. 90 seconds behind the decoys came the real strike. While the Patriot systems were fully committed to tracking and engaging the first salvo, Iran launched 25 additional missiles directly at the Patriot positions themselves. The timing was not arbitrary. 90 seconds is the gap between when a Patriot system completes an engagement sequence and when it can acquire and engage a new threat, reload time, radar reset, target reacquisition. The systems were in that exact vulnerable window when the second wave arrived. The operators saw it coming. They understood in real time what was happening. But understanding and responding are 2 entirely different things. The systems were not ready. The missiles were already inside the defensive envelope. Impacts occurred before interception was physically possible. 7 Patriot batteries. 7 times. The same tactic. Because that tactic exploits a timing gap that is not a design flaw. It is inherent to how Patriot operates at a fundamental engineering level, and it cannot be eliminated without completely rebuilding the system from scratch. The THAAD systems faced a different approach, but an equally decisive one. THAAD is engineered to intercept ballistic missiles at high altitude during the mid-course or terminal phase of flight. It is optimized for targets that arc steeply above the atmosphere. Iran's solution was simple. Launch on depressed trajectories, stay lower, fly faster through the atmosphere. Arrive at angles the system was never designed to engage. The THAAD radars tracked the incoming missiles. The battle management computers calculated intercept solutions. The interceptors launched, and they missed. Not because the technology malfunctioned, but because the geometry was wrong. 2 THAAD systems. Nearly $2 billion in hardware. Destroyed by missiles that deliberately avoided the one flight profile the systems were built to defeat. And here is the detail that has Pentagon analysts most deeply alarmed. Iran demonstrated knowledge of American defensive doctrine that should be classified at the highest levels, the precise timing of the decoy saturation, the exact depression angles used against THAAD. These are not tactics you discover through trial and error on a battlefield. These are tactics you develop when you possess detailed technical knowledge of how specific systems operate and precisely where their operational limits lie. 3 explanations are being investigated simultaneously. Iran has penetrated American defense contractors at the engineering level. Iran has captured sufficient data from previous engagement records to reverse engineer defensive response patterns, or a third party with direct access to American capability specifications shared that information with Tehran. All 3 possibilities represent catastrophic failures of American military security. All 3 are being taken seriously. But the destruction of $2.7 billion in defensive hardware, as strategically devastating as it is not even the most consequential outcome of those 90 minutes. Because what Iran did immediately after destroying the defenses tells you with complete clarity what this entire strike was designed to prepare for. Within 30 minutes of the last Patriot battery going dark, additional Iranian missiles began striking Al Udeid, Prince Sultan, Al Dhafra, and other installations that no longer had any missile defense coverage whatsoever. The follow-on strikes targeted aircraft shelters, fuel storage facilities, ammunition depots, and command infrastructure. Early damage assessments report multiple F-15 and F-16 aircraft destroyed on the ground, fuel fires burning at multiple locations, and significant degradation of command facilities. This was a 2-phase operation, executed in sequence and with precision. Phase 1, destroy the shields. Phase 2, strike the exposed targets without opposition. American forces could not stop it because the systems designed to stop it were already burning wreckage on the desert floor. The strategic damage extends well beyond American bases. Saudi Arabia and the UAE host American Patriot and THAAD, systems for one specific reason: to defend against exactly the kind of Iranian missile attack that just succeeded completely, the defensive umbrella they paid for, the American security guarantee they organized their foreign policy around. Penetrated and dismantled in 90 minutes, broadcast to the world via satellite imagery that anyone can access. The Gulf states are now making calculations. If American missile defense cannot protect American military bases, can it protect Saudi or Emirati cities? If Patriot batteries positioned to defend American forces are this vulnerable, are the batteries positioned to defend Riyadh any less so? Those questions do not have reassuring answers. Saudi Arabia has already sent diplomatic signals through back channels requesting clarification of American defensive commitments. The UAE has activated emergency protocols for its indigenous air defense systems and is reportedly accelerating discussions with non-American defense suppliers. This is what the collapse of credibility looks like in real time, not through statements or analyses, but through decisions that allied governments begin making quietly the morning after. NATO headquarters received briefings within 4 hours of the strikes. The briefing centered on a question that every member state is now asking directly. If Iranian missiles can destroy American Patriot systems, can Russian missiles do the same? Poland hosts Patriot batteries as part of its eastern flank defense. Romania operates THAAD as a core component of the European missile defense architecture. Both nations are requesting detailed technical assessments of whether their systems are vulnerable to the exact tactics Iran just demonstrated in combat. The answer from American defense contractors is not encouraging. The tactics Iran executed could theoretically be replicated by any adversary with sufficient missile inventory and access to targeting data. Russia has both, and almost certainly has the same technical knowledge of American system vulnerabilities that Iran demonstrated it possesses. In the Pacific, Japan and South Korea are watching with equal urgency. Both nations host American Patriot and THAAD systems, specifically to defend against North Korean ballistic missiles. The systems that just failed in Qatar and Saudi Arabia are the identical systems defending Seoul and Tokyo. The tactics that destroyed them in the Gulf could be applied against them in Northeast Asia. Japanese defense officials have requested emergency consultations. South Korean military leadership is conducting vulnerability assessments. Both nations are asking the same question, and the honest answer to that question is driving them toward conclusions that American policymakers are not ready to confront publicly. China is studying every detail with intense focus. Chinese military analysts are examining the Iranian strikes, the tactics, the sequencing, the effectiveness, with a precision that reflects how directly relevant the outcome is to their own strategic planning. American missile defenses in the Pacific are the primary technological obstacle to Chinese power projection in the region. Taiwan depends on American defensive commitments. Guam hosts THAAD, specifically to intercept Chinese missiles. Japan's security architecture rests partially on American defensive technology. All of it just watched $2.7 billion in American equipment be eliminated in 90 minutes by an adversary using tactics that any sufficiently capable military can study and replicate. The global perception of American defensive superiority did not shift gradually through analysis and debate. It shifted instantly through demonstration. The United States has invested more than $200 billion developing and deploying missile defense systems worldwide. That investment rested on two foundational assumptions. American technology is superior to adversary technology, and American defensive systems can protect American forces. Iran challenged both assumptions simultaneously in a single operational engagement, and the result was 7 burning Patriot batteries and 2 destroyed THAAD systems. The Patriot is not inferior technology. It is among the most capable air defense systems ever built. It has successfully intercepted missiles in multiple operational conflicts. The problem is not that Patriot does not work. The problem is that a determined adversary with sufficient resources and sufficient intelligence can develop tactics that exploit the inherent operational limits of how Patriot works. Reload time, radar reset windows, maximum simultaneous target capacity, minimum engagement range. These are not design failures. They are the physical and engineering realities of how missile defense operates. Iran identified those realities, built tactics around them, tested those tactics in the most consequential possible setting, and succeeded completely. The deeper strategic crisis is this. Missile defense has been the foundational assumption underneath American forward deployment strategy for 2 decades. The entire logic of maintaining bases in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE rests on the premise that Patriot and THAAD can defend those bases from the missile threats that make forward presence dangerous. If that premise has now been empirically invalidated, the justification for forward deployment weakens in ways that are difficult to paper over with reassurances. That debate is happening inside the Pentagon right now, and it does not have a comfortable resolution. Withdrawal solves the vulnerability problem, but abandons the forward presence that has defined American Middle East strategy since 1991. Staying means accepting operational risk at a level American commanders have not planned for in the modern era, depending on deterrence and the threat of retaliation, rather than on the certainty that incoming missiles will be stopped. The loss of $2.7 billion in hardware can be replaced. Patriot batteries can be rebuilt. THAAD systems can be redeployed. Radars can be repositioned. What cannot be replaced on any predictable timeline is the confidence that those systems will perform as promised when facing an adversary that has studied them this thoroughly. That confidence is the foundation of every alliance relationship in which American missile defense plays a role. Poland, Romania, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, the Gulf states. All of them are now performing the same calculation in their own capitals, with their own assessments of what those burning batteries mean for their security. 90 minutes, 47 missiles, 7 Patriot batteries destroyed, 2 THAAD systems eliminated, multiple radar installations reduced to wreckage. The systems specifically designed and positioned to protect American forces could not protect themselves. The adversary those systems were built to defend against just demonstrated in combat, under real operational conditions, that they had studied American defenses more thoroughly than American defenses had studied them. The proof is visible in satellite imagery. The burning wreckage is too extensive and too widely documented to obscure or minimize. American missile defense just failed its most consequential test, and every capital on Earth is now calculating, in its own way, what that failure means for the security arrangements it has built around the assumption that those systems work.